All right, in this video, we're going to be looking at Unit 6, Animals, 6.6, Birds and Mammals. This is the final section of this unit. Let's talk about birds. All right, so what are birds? Birds are reptile-like animals that are endothermic. We're going to talk about endothermic. Covered with feathers. We're going to talk about feathers. They have two legs that are covered with scales. It's just birds covered with scales. They have front limbs that are modified into structures called wings, and we know what wings are for. All right, so feathers, these are structures, and they're made of protein, and they do a couple things. They keep birds warm, which is not something that we oftentimes think about when it comes to feathers. They insulate their bodies to keep them warm, and they help most birds fly. So their structure is for flight. Birds that don't fly, feathers are still going to be useful for other things. We'll look at that as well. And so, feathers. Endotherms, what does that mean? They control their body temperature from within as a function of homeostasis, meaning that their body temperature has a normal, or their body has a normal temperature, and all the body processes are working to keep that temperature at normal, whatever normal is for a bird or an ostrich or birds. Ostriches are birds. Let's talk a little bit about bird evolution. So we've talked about this with the reptile thing, that the most common ancestor, or the most recent common ancestor for dinosaurs is birds. Well, here we go. Birds have evolved from extinct reptiles. You see this with birds and a lot of the things that they do, their reproduction. They have an amniotic egg. They have scales in some places. They what else? The excretory systems, very similar to a reptile. This is a picture of Archaeopteryx, which is thought to be kind of that link between birds and reptiles. Yeah, the picture makes it look like it's this giant thing. It wasn't, about the size of a chicken. Moving on. Flight. Birds fly. Some do really well, like this owl. It flies silently. That little mouse doesn't even know it's about to hit it. And so all their whole body is designed for flight. What does that mean? So obviously we talked about feathers, but all of their internal systems are very efficient. We'll look at some of that. They have aerodynamic bodies. They have strong hollow bones, which makes them strong and light. They have very strong chest muscles, which are used to, fly. And so everything's about flight. It's a very strong adaptation, and birds have been able to proliferate the world because of that. Let's talk about feeding. So birds eat. We knew that. They have two specialized structures. In order to do this, they have a crop and a gizzard. You see it on chicken. You've probably heard of like gizzards. Some people eat gizzards. You know what? Do what you want. These are specialized digestive structure. The crop is there to moisten the food. So you take like a chicken that's eaten a lot of arthropods, have that exoskeleton. The crop basically moistens that, starts to break it down, and then it gets into the gizzard, which is going to mechanically break down food. The gizzard is going to be full of things like rocks and that sort of thing. It's going to kind of grind up the food. And so like chickens will just eat rocks. You may have chickens, and that's why they do that. Puts them in their gizzard, and it grinds up some of the stuff that they're eating, grass or whatever, and allows it to be more digestible. Respiration. Birds have a respiratory system. You probably knew that. But their respiratory system is much different than any other animal that we've talked about, because the air is only flowing in one direction. What do I mean? So like when we breathe in, I take a deep breath, the bottom air goes into my lungs, and then it comes back out the same way. That air has gone through my lungs in two different directions. For birds, they have these structures called air sacs. Let's see if I can point to one on the screen here. These little air sacs right here, and this allows for air to travel in just one direction across the lungs, meaning that there's no stale air in the lungs. There's nothing that's trapped at the bottom of the lungs, and so yeah, there's that. Really good, really efficient. Speaking of efficiency. Birds have a four-chambered heart and a double-loop circulatory system. Why is the four-chambered heart important? So with the four-chambered heart, I love this picture because you can see all the different circulatory systems that we've talked about, at least with vertebrates. The four-chambered heart allows there to be no mixing of blood that has oxygen and blood that doesn't have oxygen. You see this same system with mammals. I love how they put bird and mammal next to each other, and they're literally the same thing. So very similar, but very efficient. No mixing of the blood, whereas you have some mixing of blood with amphibians, even in some reptiles. And so you start to have more efficient systems with circulation. Moving on to movement. So we talked about birds flying. There are some birds that don't fly, like penguins. They still have all the other bird things. It's just all those bird things are more designed for them to do their thing, which is swim. They're very good swimmers, like really fast. Some birds run really fast, and so usually if they're not flying, they're doing something else better. There's some birds that don't really follow this, but like kiwis, what do they do well? I mean, really. Bird ecology. No, this isn't ecology. This is reproduction. I should read my slide. So what is reproduction? We know what reproduction is, but they have internal fertilization. They have amniotic eggs, very similar to reptiles. And the big thing with birds, their parents generally care for their young up to a certain age, depending on the bird species. There's going to be some exceptions to this, but generally birds are caring for their young, which is going to increase young lifespan and allow for species survival. It's a good thing. Moving on. There's bird ecology. I love this picture. It's the canary in the coal mine, right? So they would take canaries into coal mines to tell them if there was enough oxygen. Because if there wasn't enough oxygen, the bird would die, and then you probably shouldn't go in there too. Well, it's kind of silly. The reason I use this, because birds are usually a good indicator of ecological health. There are certain kinds of species that will only show up if the ecosystem is healthy. Hummingbirds are a great example of this. There's all kinds of stuff we could talk about here. But birds, they're all over the place. They generally interact with humans on every level, either pests or helpful, and there's all kinds of interactions there. But I thought that was neat, just the fact that there are some birds that serve as indicators of environmental health. Moving on to mammals. What are mammals? They're animals with hair and mammary glands, hence their names. We'll talk about that. Endotherms also. What are mammary glands? Well, there are structures that allow the female mammal to feed their young milk. We know what mammary glands are. Look at them. They're all eating. They're all happy. It's a lot of pigs. Hair is used for temperature regulation in general. There's some other functions for hair. I had a picture of a human arm here because obviously we've lost most of our body hair, or at least to the same level that other mammals have it, because we know how to make clothes, so it's a little different. But most animals, their hair is their first line of defense against the weather in various ways. Allows them to protect themselves from parasites and all that kind of thing as well, versus not having that. And so we are able to adapt in other ways without that. But yeah, temperature regulation just kind of traps a warm layer of air close to the skin. It's almost like an insulation. It allows for us to stay warmer. Feeding. So mammal teeth and jaws are specialized according to their diet. There's a lot of words that we could use for teeth. We're not going to here. It's beyond the scope of this class. But you can see there's, and this is a horse, and so you can see there's even different kinds of teeth. And so that's different. So you look into a horse mouth, and it's going to look completely different than a wolf mouth because they're eating different things. Right? With reptiles, you don't really have that. They all kind of have the same teeth, whereas you have mammals, very different teeth. For different diets, different niches in their ecosystems. And for respiration, a big thing for mammal respiration is the presence of a diaphragm, which is this muscular thing underneath the lungs that allows for air to come in and out of the lungs, kind of pushes and pulls air in and out of the lungs. The diaphragm looks like diaphragm. Just remember that when you're trying to spell it. Response. This is a big thing that separates mammals from the rest of the species that we've been talking about. They have highly developed brains. The cerebral cortex, which is the portion of the brain that does most of the thinking, which when you look at a mammal brain, or especially a human brain like this one, that is what you're seeing. You're seeing the cerebral cortex, because this is where all the thinking and complex behaviors are housed, as opposed to, say, like a chicken, or chickens aren't that dumb, but like a snake or something like that. They're just not going to have the thinking involved here. Now, we've given up some of the other things, we like sensory and some of that. Now, some animals have more than others, but thinking, complex problem solving, this is going to separate us from a lot of mammals, from a lot of other animals. And then reproduction. Most mammals have a structure called a placenta, which allows for the internal development of the offspring and live birth. Most mammals have a high amount of parental investment. Take these polar bears that will stay with their mother for like 3 years. That's a very high degree of parental investment. And so what's the purpose of that? those two bears have a much higher chance of survival than, say, like an insect baby, which has almost a zero chance of survival. So depending on the mammal, it's going to be different. Some mammals have a really low survivability, but that they get around this by having lots of offspring, things like rats and rabbits and possums and that sort of thing. But a bear has a much higher rate of survival because there's a much more investment there. Speaking of possums, this isn't a possum. This is a platypus. There are three groups of mammals that you need to know. Monotremes, these are egg-laying mammals. The duck-billed platypus and the spiny anteater are the two examples of monotremes. Sometimes you'll see spiny anteater called echidna. That's kind of like the name that people call it when they want to sound smart. Echidna. All right, so marsupials, what is their thing? They have a pouch, so they do not have a placenta. Rather than a placenta, they have a pouch. We have a marsupial that lives around here. It's a possum. Possums like to eat cat food, get ran over by cars. And placentals. These are like most mammals. They have a placenta for internal birth. We are placentals, among with many, many other mammals. Speaking of we, primates is a special group of placentals. What makes a primate a primate? There are several things that make a primate a primate. Well-developed cerebrum, so much more thinking than the rest of mammals. Binocular vision. This means both eyes are facing forward so that we can see, have definition, like facing forward, you know what I mean? Prehensile tail. Prehensile tail is a tail that can act as kind of like a hand. Like, we don't have that, but that monkey does. Look at him. He's saying prehensile tail. And then the opposable thumbs. This is a thumb that can be used for grasping. This is birds and mammals. This is Unit 6.